So what insights has the campaign so far provided about us, the voter? It would seem on one level that everything like Blake's websites, in a fashion, your websites, a ton of cable coverage, a substantial newspaper coverage has given us more information than we've ever had. Are we better informed?
Short answer is no, we're not better informed. If you look at young people about whom everybody is so excited about their participation this year, the latest studies that we have, which is only about a year old, only 11% of young people are actually regularly going to the internet and using the internet as a source for news. They're still using television just like most Americans, and that's been the case since around 1965. And television is a terrible source of information. And one of the reasons I wrote my book is to try to get at why are our politics so dumb. I don't make the argument in the book that the American people are stupid, but I do make the argument that our politics are stupid, and one reason for that is that the people aren't very smart, and politicians count on that, and they take advantage of that, which is why the people are generally sitting ducks for wily politicians. My big disappointment in this campaign is we are not talking about what I think is the most important domestic democracy issue of the time, and I don't hear anybody talking about it, not Obama, not Clinton, not McCain. And it's very simply, if you go back to 9/11 in Iraq and you see where public opinion was, we had a dramatic failure of our democracy, and nobody's talking about it. And just to review the numbers really quickly, because you've kind of heard them, but I don't think people have framed the issue properly. We haven't understood that it is our failure. It's not just George Bush's failure. It's not the media's failure alone. It is the American public's failure. On the eve of the Iraq War, a majority of the American people were convinced that Saddam Hussein was behind 9/11. Now, that wasn't factually true then, and any person who wanted the actual facts could read it in their local paper right on the front pages, but people were sitting ducks for the Bush administration's propaganda and the media spin, and they missed that, and they continued missing it. Even after the 9/11 Commission came out flat out and said there's no truth to this story that Saddam Hussein was behind 9/11, still a majority of Americans believe that. Now, that alone should be frightening. And then there's, you compare that with another poll finding by some other groups, which found that of the people who were backing the Iraq War, 70% said that the key reason why they backed the war was they thought Saddam was behind 9/11. Now, this is an utter failure of our democracy. Now, I know some of the optimists want to say that in 2004 the American people redeemed themselves to a certain extent by they started, after Bush got re-elected, toward the end of 2004 and then really in 2005, public opinion started turning against the war. Bush just squeaked in. He didn't have a dramatic landslide victory like Clinton did, for instance, in '96, where he carried a lot more of the country. But when you think of the disaster that the Iraq War has been, and you think of all the tens of thousands of people who died, when the American people get something this wrong, sure, we'll survive and we will keep going, but the consequences are disastrous. And I want us to be talking about this. This should be on the national agenda. I opened up my New York Times this morning. There on the front page, they were complaining about how special interests are financing the Democratic Party's convention and the Republican Party's convention. Absolutely. That's a problem. This is a much bigger problem, but we don't want to talk about it. Why? Because of the myth of the people. And I won't give away my entire thesis in my book, but in the last 40 years, we've all become populists. It used to be that at least the Republicans and conservatives, when the public would go wrong, the conservatives were there to point that out. That was part of the historic mission of conservatism in this country, was to raise doubts about the people. Democrats, of course, were natural defenders of the people. That was their base, and they were always willing to overlook or excuse the public's failures. But since really 1980, absolutely, at that point, Ronald Reagan was a populist. He said the people are good and virtuous, and what we need is a government as good and virtuous as the people. He sounded just like FDR in 1932. And from that point forward, you have liberals and conservatives all being populists. So nobody's drawing the attention to the failures of the public. And I think they're significant, and it would be nice if somebody had guts, somebody in the political arena, it doesn't take guts for me to say this, but for somebody in the political arena to draw attention to this. It's something we need to talk about, and the reason I wrote the book is I want to put it on the national agenda.
In some, you raised doubts about the conventional wisdom of the positive, edifying legacy of the Kennedy-Nixon debates, which, as we all know, first one, seemingly the most influential one, was here not too far away from where we are. In a minute and a half, why?
Well, first let me say that I think we're better off having presidential debates than not having presidential debates, because the American people are generally so ignorant and indifferent to politics that what little information they wind up picking up at these debates is a plus. And just to talk about for 20 seconds how ignorant they are, the numbers are absolutely astonishing. Only 2 out of 5 Americans can name the 3 branches of government. Only 1 in 7 can find Iraq on a map. After 5 years of war, only 1 in 5 know we have 100 U.S. senators. So, keeping in mind that that's the audience, the problem is the people wind up looking at these debates, and they measure the candidates by the impact that their personality has. Television is a fundamentally shallow medium, and if you look back at the Nixon-Kennedy debates, the classic line is, if you actually listen to the words of the 2 candidates, it was a draw, and in some of the subsequent debates, Nixon maybe even had the edge. But if you're watching, you're seeing Kennedy is tanned and he's rested, and Nixon is all sweaty. One of the things that I point out in the book is that after that 1960 election, the lesson that Richard Nixon learned was, I've got to hire ad men and put them in charge of my campaign, because apparently in the television era, that it's ad man, Madison Avenue values that are going to drive our elections. I think he learned, he's a pragmatic politician, he learned the right lesson. Unfortunately, it's morally obscene, but given the system, that's the lesson he learned.
How stupid are we? You get to predict, and we'll see just how smart you are. We're going to keep the tape, so.
You're going to see just how really smart I am. Look, I'm a historian. Historians don't do predictions. We can't agree on the past, let alone start trying to figure out the future. So that's my prediction.
Well, with that high-minded spinelessness, I want to, in ascending order, I want to thank David Mendel, author of Obama from Promise to Power, Rick Shenkman, author of Just How Stupid Are We, Blake Dvorak, an editor of the absolutely wonderful political website, RealClearPolitics.com.